Go and stand on the sidewalk and look at your own flower bed. Nothing out there is dying, nothing's diseased. Everything you paid for is still alive, and the whole thing still looks like a mess. I had that bed 9 years, and the entire time I treated it as a plant problem, so every spring I bought more plants, and every summer it looked slightly worse. It was never the plants. It was 14 things underneath them, and 12 of the 14 don't cost $1 to fix. One of the 14 is the reason your bed looks like nothing at all for 5 months of the year, and you cannot see it in September, which is exactly why nobody ever fixes it. That one's number 1. 14 counting down. Number 9 is the one I'd put money on you having. Number 14, the bed is mostly brown. Stand at the curb and ask what color your bed is. If the honest answer is brown, this is why. You planted at the spacing on the tag. Everybody does. The trouble is that the number on that tag is written for the plant's health. Enough air, enough root room, no mildew. It is not written for how the bed looks. Follow it exactly, and 3 years later you still have soil showing between everything. And a bed that's more than half bare mulch reads as objects sitting on brown, not as a planting. The number you actually want is 2/3 of the mature width. A hosta tagged at 30 inches across goes 20 inches from its neighbor. A coral bells tagged at 18 goes 12. At maturity they touch, and the bed reads as one surface instead of a dozen separate purchases. That's not overcrowding, and this is the part people push back on. Perennials die back to nothing every winter. The clump you're crowding in July is an empty patch of soil in January, which is why they forgive tight planting in a way a shrub never will. Crowd a shrub, and you're taking one out in 5 years. Crowd perennials, and you get a full bed a season earlier. You don't have to buy anything to fix this. Lift what's already out there and bring it in this month and next, or the right window for most of it, and put a single low plant repeated across the whole front of the bed so the edge is never bare. The one honest cost. Planted tight, you'll be dividing sooner, every 3 or 4 years instead of 5 or 6. That's the trade, and it's worth it. Number 13, the fabric under the mulch. This next one was sold to you as the cure for the exact problem it creates. Landscape fabric goes down to stop weeds. For the first couple of years it does. Then the mulch sitting on top of it does what mulch does. It rots down into a thin layer of soil. Seeds blow in and land on that layer. And now your weeds are germinating on top of the fabric, rooting straight down into the weave, where you cannot pull them out with the root attached. You get the top. The root stays. It's back in 2 weeks. You paid money to make your own weeding permanent. The second half is quieter and worse. A perennial bed feeds itself from the top down, mulch breaks down, worms drag it under. The soil gets darker and looser every year. Fabric stops all of that at the barrier. The soil underneath gets poorer and tighter every season, while you're standing on top of it wondering why nothing out there grows the way it used to. The extension services have been saying this for years. New Hampshire and Illinois both put it plainly. In a perennial bed, don't. What to do? Pull it out. It's a bad afternoon, and it's the last one. Then let 2 to 3 inches of shredded hardwood do the job instead, with plants close enough together that there's no lit ground for a weed seed to land on. The honest exception, under a gravel path where nothing is meant to grow, fabric is fine. Keep it there. Number 12, the first thing you see isn't a plant. Go back out there and notice where your eye lands first. I'll tell you what it lands on. The air conditioner, the gas meter, the gray electrical box, the downspout emptying into the corner. Your eye is drawn to whatever is most man-made in a frame every time, and once it lands on a beige metal box, it stops reading the planting altogether. It's why a well-planted bed can still photograph badly. Now, the fix has a rule attached to it, and getting this wrong costs real money. 2 to 3 feet of clear space on every side of that unit, 5 feet above it. Nothing planted inside that ring that grows taller than the unit. Choke that airflow, and you're paying for it on the power bill and shortening the life of the machine. So you don't hide it, you break up the view. A group of 3 ornamental grasses set 3 feet back, off to one side, not a row across the front, and the eye goes to the grasses on its way past. Skip anything that drops small petals or needles into the fins. The meter and the electrical box take a different answer. One shrub standing at an angle in front, never a panel flat against the wall, and never anything the meter reader has to fight through. Plant a thorny shrub over a gas meter and somebody will cut it down for you eventually, and they won't do it kindly. The downspout is the easiest thing in this entire video. $10. Quick thing, because a lot of you have been asking where all this is written down. Every one of these is a decision rather than a purchase, and the decisions are the part nobody writes down for you. Mine are in a book, The Low Maintenance Garden Blueprint, what goes where, what to leave out, and how to set a bed up once so it stops asking you for things. It's at henrysgardensecrets.com. That's the only time I'll bring it up. Number 11. The bed is too narrow. Here's a mistake with a tape measure attached to it, which makes it the easiest one on the list to check. Go outside and measure from your siding to the front edge of the bed. If that number is 3 feet, you don't have a planting. You have a baseboard, and against a 2-story wall, it looks like one. A thin painted stripe at the bottom of a very tall thing. The rule of thumb the design trade works to is 6 to 8 feet deep. Not because 6 is magic, but because 6 is the first number that holds 3 layers of plants, and 3 layers is what stops a bed looking like a row. At 3 feet, you are forced to plant everything in a single line, whether you meant to or not, which is why so many American front beds look like a hedge that lost its nerve. There's a second reason, and it's a practical one. Anything shrub-sized wants 5 feet or more off the foundation for air, for the paint, and so you can get behind it with a ladder when the gutters need doing. A 3-foot bed guarantees that every shrub in it is pressed against your siding. And that's how people end up cutting the back off a hydrangea with a hedge trimmer every August. And this is the cheapest fix in the whole video. You buy nothing. You lay a hose on the grass 2 feet further out than the bed currently ends, you cut along it with a spade, and you've made the single biggest change available to you this weekend. The lawn will not miss it. Number 10, the shape is doing too much. Now one that costs nothing and announces itself every time you mow. Somewhere along the way, bed edges got scalloped. In and out, 5 different size curves in one run of 12 feet. It was meant to look flowing. What it actually does is give your eye a dozen decisions to make in 3 seconds, and an eye that's working that hard reads the whole thing as busy. But here's the part almost nobody says out loud. You can't mow it. Every tight corner is a spot the mower deck can't reach, so every tight corner grows a tuft of tall grass that you either trim separately or leave standing. 10 curves, 10 tufts. That's not a design problem anymore. That's a Saturday morning problem, and it's the reason those beds always look slightly unkempt, no matter how much time you put in. One long, lazy curve for each side of the bed. That's it, and there's a test for it that costs nothing, and I genuinely like you to try. Take a garden hose out onto the lawn and lay it where you want the edge to run. If the hose settles into the curve on its own, the shape is right. If you have to hold it down or kink it into place, the curve is tighter than a mower can follow and tighter than an eye wants to follow, which turns out to be about the same thing. One thing I'd like to know before we go on. A lot of the beds I get sent photographs of were not built by the person standing in front of them. They came with the house, laid out by somebody who moved away 15 years ago and never had to weed any of it. So tell me in the comments, did you lay your bed out yourself or did you inherit it and put your state next to it? Whatever comes up most down there is what I go and look at next. Number 9. Every plant in the bed is the same shape. This is the one I'd put money on, and it's the one nobody in this line of work ever names. Go out and look at the outlines, not the flowers, the shapes. In most American beds, every plant is a mound. A dome of hosta, a dome of daylily, a dome of coral bells, a dome of hardy geranium, all different plants, all the same outline. Your eye reads the whole bed as one thing and gives up on it, and no amount of flower color fixes that. There are 3 shapes, and a bed needs all 3. Upright, something that goes straight up and gives the eye a full stop. Siberian iris, liatris, and ornamental grass, veronica, broad and flat, the big solid leaf that everything else reads against. Hosta, bergenia, brunera, coral bells, fine and open, the one that blurs so the bed has some air in it. Amsonia, threadleaf coreopsis, baptisia, astilbe when it's finished flowering. Most beds have the broad and the mounded and nothing else. Add one group of 3 upright plants and 1 drift of something fine, and the bed changes more than another dozen flowering perennials would. And you can test this without buying anything. Photograph the bed and turn the picture black and white on your phone. With the color stripped out, what's left is shape, and if it reads as one flat gray mass, that's what everybody driving past has been seeing all summer underneath the flowers. The reason this matters more than color: shape is still working in February. Color isn't. Every one of the upright plants I just named leaves something standing when the flowers have gone, which is a large part of why they earn their space twice. Number 8. Too many colors, and none of them repeat. Count them. That's the entire exercise for this one, and it takes a minute. Walk out and count how many distinct flower colors are in a single bed, not plants' colors. Most people who do this honestly come back with 8, 9, sometimes 11. And every one of them arrived for a good reason. It was pretty on the bench, or it filled a hole, or somebody gave it to you. The number a bed can carry is about 3, plus green. Past that, no single color is strong enough to lead, so the eye bounces between them and never settles. That bouncing is precisely the feeling you're calling messy. And notice how the extra ones got there. Nobody sits down and chooses 9 colors. They arrive one at a time over about 6 years, each one perfectly reasonable on the day it came home. The quickest correction, and it costs nothing. Don't add, subtract. Pick the 2 or 3 colors that already appear most often out there and move the true one-offs to another bed or to the back where they read as depth rather than as a statement. 1 orange plant in a pink and purple bed is a mistake. 9 orange plants would be a decision, and if you're stuck between colors that fight, white. White sits between anything. A drift of white at the point where 2 colors meet stops the argument, and it's the one color that keeps working at dusk, when the rest of the bed has gone flat and gray and you're finally out there with a cup of something. Number 7, the wrong plant for the light. This one looks like a design problem, and it's actually an address problem. A hosta in full afternoon sun doesn't die. It gets scorched brown edges on every leaf by mid-July and lies down flat by 1 o'clock every afternoon. A coneflower under a maple doesn't die either. It stretches, it leans toward whatever light it can find, it makes one flower and falls over. Neither plant is sick. Both look wrong for 6 straight months, and from the sidewalk that reads as neglect. So here's the honest bit. Almost nobody actually knows how much sun their bed gets. They know what it feels like in the middle of a Sunday. Go and check it properly. 3 days running, look at that bed at 9 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and 5 in the evening, and add up the hours of direct sun. Under 4 hours is shade. 4 to 6 is part sun. 6 and over is full sun. Most people are off by 2 whole categories, and I was off by 2 in my own front bed for years. Then move things. Don't buy things, move them. September and October are the right months for it. The soil is still warm, and a hosta that's been suffering in the sun for 3 summers will look like a different plant next June in a spot where it gets morning light and nothing afternoon. And do the count now rather than in spring, because the answer changes. The tree that shades that bed has all its leaves on today. In April, when you're standing there with a plant in your hand deciding where to put it, that same spot will look like full sun, and it isn't. Number 6, the supports are more visible than the plants. Look at what's holding your bed up. Bamboo canes with green twine wrapped around a phlox, 3 wire hoops around the Shasta daisies, a tomato cage over a peony, which is the one I see more than any other, and the plant sagging outward through it anyway, so what you're actually looking at is hardware with some leaves in it. Here's the thing about supports, and it's the whole trick. They only disappear if you put them in early. A grow-through ring set over the crown in May vanishes completely by mid-June because the plant comes up through the grid and covers it. The same ring pushed down over a collapsed plant in July is visible until frost, and it doesn't even work. You've bundled the stems into a fist rather than held them apart. So in September, there's no fixing this one. What there is a list to make. Walk the bed now and write down every plant that needed propping this year, because those names are next May's job, and by next May, you won't remember. And one thing worth knowing before you order a box of stakes: a plant that flops in the same spot every year is usually telling you something else. Too much shade, so the stems are reaching. Or too much nitrogen, which gives you soft growth that can't hold itself up. Fix the spot, and half the hardware becomes unnecessary. Subscribe before we start the back half. Not because of this video, because you will not remember any of this in March. That's not an insult, it's just how gardening works. You fix what's in front of you in the season you happen to be standing in. Number 5, everything you're storing in the bed. This is the 10-minute one, and I'd put it first if I thought anybody would still be watching. The hose coiled in the corner where you left it. 4 empty nursery pots stacked behind the hydrangea. The plant tags still standing where you pushed them into the soil in April, gone chalky white. Half a bag of mulch folded over. The tomato cage you didn't end up using. And the wheelbarrow. I had a wheelbarrow parked in my front bed for an entire summer, not a week, a summer. And I stopped seeing it somewhere around the middle of June, the way you stop hearing a clock. Every one of these on its own is nothing. Together they change what the space is. A planting with 6 objects stored in it isn't a planting anymore. It's a storage area with some flowers around the edge, and every person who drives past reads it that way in half a second without knowing why. 10 minutes, no money. And it's the largest single change most people watching this can make today. The tags are the one people argue with me about. I know why they're there. Write the names in a notebook or take a photograph of each tag before you pull it and get them out of the soil. 20 white plastic sticks scattered through a bed will undo everything else on this list. Number 4, the clump with the dead middle. Some of these you can see from the street. This one you have to walk into the bed to find, and it's doing more damage than most of what's above it. A perennial that's been sitting in the same spot for 8 years stops being a clump and turns into a ring. The middle dies out. The whole plant splits open from the center, and the outer stems fall sideways onto whatever's next to them. Daylilies do it. Garden phlox does it. Shasta daisies, Siberian iris, coreopsis, all of them on schedule. And here's why it's so hard to catch. Nothing is dying. Every plant is technically alive, so there's nothing to diagnose. The bed just slowly comes apart, one clump leaning onto the next, and the whole thing starts to read as neglected, even though you're out there weeding it every Saturday. There's a cost underneath the look, too. A phlox lying across the plant beside it puts that plant in shade it wasn't planted for, and holds wet foliage against wet foliage, which is how you end up with mildew on 2 plants instead of 1. You go by the symptom, not the calendar. A bare center or stems leaning outward when the plant is in full sun. That's the plant asking. Roughly every 3 to 5 years for most things, but the plant tells you first. If you've just walked out there and found one, you're in the right month for it. September is when most perennials come apart cleanly, and there are a handful that will die if you try. I made a whole video on which is which. It's on the screen at the end. Number 3, everything blooms in June. Think about what your bed looked like on the 4th of July, and then about what it looked like on the 15th of August. For most people, the answer is spectacular for about 3 weeks, then a green rectangle for the rest of the year. And the reason is slightly embarrassing once you see it. You bought your plants in May. In May, the only things flowering on the nursery bench are the things that flower in May and June, so that's what came home in the cart year after year, until you had a bed with 1 season in it. The fix is a bit of arithmetic you do once. Split the year into 3 windows, spring, high summer, and fall, and make yourself have at least 2 plants flowering in each. Right now, walk out and work out which window you're short on. For nearly everybody, it's the 3rd one, which is why September and October gardens in this country look so empty next to June ones. Then the piece that matters more than any of the flowers. Put in at least 1 plant that does its work with leaves instead of blooms. Hosta, coral bells, Bergania, Brunera. These don't have a season. They're doing the same job in May that they're doing in September. A bed built out of flowers looks good for a month. A bed built out of leaves looks good for half a year. Number 2, no layers. The nursery sets this trap for you, and it is almost impossible to see coming. Everything on that bench is in a 10-inch pot. Everything is roughly knee-high. You choose by flower, you bring 6 plants home, and you plant them at more or less the spacing that looks right for 6 plants that are all the same size, because on the day you plant them, they are. 3 years later, the garden phlox is 4 feet tall and standing directly in front of the hosta, which nobody has seen since. That's not bad luck. That was decided at the register. So read the mature height off the tag, not the pot in your hands. It's on there, in small type, and it's the only number on the label that matters for how the bed will look. There's also a height limit that keeps a bed from tipping forward, and it's a rule of thumb rather than a law. The tallest plant should be somewhere around half the depth of the bed. In a 6-foot bed, that's a 3-foot ceiling. Go much past that, and the back row starts falling forward into the front, which is a large part of why narrow beds look chaotic. They weren't wide enough for what got planted in them. And 3 layers is enough, not 14 little steps down to the lawn, a low front, 1 solid mass through the middle, and 1 or 2 tall things for punctuation. Not every plant needs its own stair. Number 1, the bed disappears for 5 months. From November to April, most American flower beds are a rectangle of bare dirt with a house behind them. 5 months. And it's the one thing on this list you cannot see in September, which is exactly why it never gets fixed, because right now is the only time you can see at the same time what's staying and what's about to vanish. 3 things are enough. 1 evergreen anchor. Dwarf balsam fir nana is hardy to zone 3 and never needs cutting. Boxwood green velvet holds in zone 4. Inkberry gets recommended for this everywhere, and it's genuinely zone 5. Check before you buy. 1 ornamental grass, left standing, don't cut it in fall. The dry heads hold frost and snow and move all winter. Cut it in March before new growth comes through. 1 plant with dry standing structure. Panicle hydrangea, zone 3, and the flower heads go tan and stay up. Not the oak leaf. Oak leaf stops at zone 5. Do that, and yours is the 1 bed on the street that still exists in February. Spacing, fabric, the utilities, too narrow, too busy a shape, 1 shape of plant, too many colors, the wrong light, the supports, the storage, the dead middle, all of it in June, no layers, and winter. 12 of the 14 cost nothing. Not one of them is a plant you have to go and buy.